Well, you wouldn't think it, but by looking at the records of the Rockies and the San Francisco Giants, but the offenses, especially of these two teams, have a lot of similarities, but there are key differences and a key difference on the other side of the ball as well. That's going to be massive in this next series.
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock on Rockies fans, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast for today, the 6th day of July in the year 2023. I'm your host of the Locked On Rockies podcast, Paul Holden, your Rockies fan extraordinaire, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day. If your team is the Colorado Rockies, well, guess what? You're in the right spot, because that's what we do around here each and every day, is talk about the Colorado Rockies on your favorite streaming service or live on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel, where you can be part of the show. All you got to do, search Locked On Rockies on your favorite streaming service or YouTube. Check us out there. Make sure you subscribe so you know when we go live, and then you can be part of the live chat as well and fire off your Rockies hot takes and a whole lot more. We're also on SiriusXM and the SiriusXM app. Just search Locked On Rockies or Colorado Rockies for all your Rockies play-by-play action throughout the season. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Swing for the fences on Sleeper picks, and you can win up to 100 times your money. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code Locked On, and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions do apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. Folks, on the episode, we're going to talk about, I was pretty shocked to see this, especially when you look at the history of maybe the matchup of these two teams kind of skews things for you a little bit, or at least for me. And I was surprised to see how similar the Rockies and Giants are on offense, but there's a drastic difference in a couple of categories. In one category that we've talked about time and time again, and they're on the other side of the ball in a much better spot, albeit still struggling. We're also going to talk about this being a get-right series for both teams. Both teams are certainly looking to use this series as something to feel good going into the break, especially as both of these teams have lost 4 out of their last 5 ball games. And San Francisco, of course, wanting to continue to be in the fight and in the mix here as we are in the midpoint of the season, kind of an important check-in point as you figure out and decide where you want to be and what you want to do as the trade deadline looms. But let's start with the similarities here that I thought have been really interesting between these two teams. And I think it's important to set this up by saying, currently, the Rockies are 33-55, and San Francisco is 47-40. The Rockies are 13-31 away from Coors Field. San Francisco's 24-21. The home and away things we'll touch on later on. But I wanted to just dive into overall team stats by offenses right now. The Rockies have a team batting average of 255. The Giants have a team batting average of 248. The Rockies have scored 385 runs. The Giants have scored 408. The Rockies have 759 hits compared to the Giants' 734. The Rockies have 78 home runs to the Giants' 102. OBP of 316 for the Rockies, 324 for the Giants, and a slugging of 4.01 for Colorado and 4.06 for San Francisco. Getting the stats from ESPN today. And there's a lot of similarities there, except in a couple of key areas, you see the difference. First off, you see the problem with the Rockies' lack of extra base hits, and this builds up into the home run. The home run splits are a massive reason why the Giants are 7 games above 500 and not 12 games below 500. We'll dive into that in a second, but look at the amount of runs scored here and hits compared to these two teams. The Rockies have scored 385 runs on 759 hits versus the Giants scoring 23 more runs on 25 less hits. The Rockies singles approach, or it seems to be the result for most of the players, is contributing to the lack of offensive generation. With the Rockies' inability or not being an aggressive base stealing team, Singles aren't really going to help you, especially when the Rockies have left so many runners stranded and left so many runners in scoring position. They need to start hitting doubles. They need to start hitting the ball in the gap more and start driving up extra base hits. Now, it's interesting when I start saying that the Giants are only slugging, 0.005 more than the Rockies are, and they're getting on base only about 0.009 more times than the Rockies are when it comes to average. I know that wasn't the best way to say those stats. The Rockies and Giants are comparable on an on-base percentage and slugging, but it's that slight difference, and especially the big difference of home runs. This is how you win those ball games. This is how you get to being above 500, is even though your offense isn't necessarily excelling or great in terms of average, they score runs. They are scoring more because of the long ball. That the being 20, hitting 20 or 30, what is that? No, 28 more home runs than the Rockies. Hold on. My math, once again, still not great. 26 more home runs than the Rockies. That's a big deal. That's a big gap. That's a big difference. And it's especially a difference when we see in the series of why when the Rockies lose 1-run or 2-run ball games like they did in the last 2 games against the Giants. That's when the long ball is going to come in handy. That's when the Rockies need to be better at driving in things. The Giants are just were better in that last series at generating runs, even when they weren't hitting in a lot. In the second win, when they did win 5-4, the Rockies were the only one actually to hit the home run. But the Giants were more effective at moving runners, moving them station to station, and getting them in a position to make that to take that win. But when you're looking at the damage done by the Giants in the first one, there's a couple of extra base hits. The first game against the Rockies, a 10-4 win. The Giants were still even able to do that without using the long ball. They just seem to have a big control and domination of Rockies pitching. In the final game of the first series that these two teams played, in the sweep, a 6-4 loss to the Rockies, that's when the home run was a key difference for the Giants, with Estrada homering, Conforto homering, and then Crawford getting another extra base hit there with a double. So this, even though when they're that similar, because the numbers are very, very close. I mean, those are all within ranges of each other. You look at the glaring differences on offense, and the home run is the biggest thing. Time and time again, the home run is continuing to be an issue for the Rockies, and this is a key series and a key moment to kind of point out a difference there and why having that power potential is so important. At least, especially because of how close the two teams are in slugging and OBP. I thought that was the most fascinating part of this whole thing. It was the fact that the batting average, the on-base percentage, and the slugging for the Rockies and the Giants are very close to each other. And then the massive difference that I think really leads to the biggest change when you're talking and focusing just on the offensive side is this team's, is the Giants' ability to hit home runs. The biggest and main difference, though, that I think is a bigger contributor to why the Giants are in a better spot than the Rockies is pitching performance. And we're going to talk about those stats here coming up next here in segment number 2. But before we dive into that, I want to tell you about our friends at Sleeper. Sleeper is the place for you to kind of flex your knowledge a little bit. I think it's a fun way to challenge. It's kind of like fantasy. It's kind of it's kind of like 2.0 in the sense that you can look at some lines. You can look at lines of who's going to hit home runs, how many innings pitched, how many strikeouts, and you kind of the type of lines that I like to look at, and you can pick them and select them and build them all into a team. And you can get 100 times your money or on daily fantasy baseball, because Sleeper is now offering up to 100 times payout for up to 8 pick contests. So you can pick 8 people. You can pick the different lines that you want to do: home runs, strikeouts, hits. Maybe you want to just go with hits, and you're confident in the Rockies in this series. You can get pick up to 8 players doing different stats and have them follow along. And it's a different and fun, unique way to kind of take things to the next level, and combining fantasy and daily fantasy as well. So check it out there on the Sleeper app. And when you are a first-time depositor, you can receive 100% instant deposit match up to $100 using promo code Locked On. So check it out. Just download the Sleeper app and use that promo code Locked On when you sign up for that instant deposit matchup up to $100. Check it out, Sleeper, and you can swing for the fences. This is the Locked On Rockies podcast. We are free and streaming on your favorite streaming service, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Rockies podcast, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk here, where you can find your team every day. If your team is the Colorado Rockies, you can find yourself on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel. You can find yourself on the Locked On Rockies live chat, just like Luxace, just like Kevin Greenhoe, just like Derek Brown. And we'll dive into those comments here in just a second. But before we do that, want to remind you that we're also on SiriusXM and the SiriusXM app. We are also on all your favorite streaming services. Check us out there. You can hang out with us here and figure out what's going on with these Colorado Rockies and the main difference between these two teams. Like we said, I wanted the main difference, I think, when you're looking at these two teams and why they have a completely different mindset or results this year. Pitching is the big reason. Rockies have a 5.81 ERA compared to the San Francisco's ERA of 3.94. Whip for the Rockies, a 1.57, 1.26 for the Giants. Walks at 338 walks compared to the Giants' 235. Strikeouts, 639 for the Rockies, 763 for San Francisco. An opponent batting average for San Francisco of 250. And Colorado at 286. There's the key difference. There's the difference. There's all of there's the massive gap right there. When teams are batting nearly 300 against you, when you are giving up more than 100 more walks than your opponent, when you are striking out over 100 less batters than your opponent, that shows you. And you're giving up, and your ERA is at 5, is nearly 2 points higher than your opponent. That's the major difference. That's the massive difference. The Giants are pitching better. And again, we've talked about this time and time again, but it's the Giants were prepared to go through a 162 game season and managed to go through and prepare to navigate through this season. And as we go through this season, you're seeing the differences. You're seeing the difference in preparation. You're seeing the difference in farm, and you're seeing the difference in depth. So when you really are diving in and looking into and thinking about the massive difference, because like we said, it's getting those final outs. It's being clutch. It's getting better performances from across the board. I mean, the Rockies need their pitchers in this series. If they're going to have a chance in this series, they have to get their starting pitchers to go out and get into the 6th inning, keep games close. And they're going to have to hope that their offense backs them up, because what another massive difference between the two teams is, again, the Rockies struggling on the road, and then going into a place like San Francisco has never been kind to a place to a team like the Rockies. The Rockies need their pitchers more than ever if they are going to take a chance and really make some noise in this series or against the Giants going forward, because the Giants feast on when the Rockies make mistakes, especially as pitchers, the Giants just feast on these guys. The Giants have experience against the guys that the Rockies are throwing, especially when you got Gomber coming up here in the first part of the rotation. You got they've seen the Rockies. They know the Rockies. So they have to lead the way. They have to be sharp. They have to be better. But tonight, Austin Gomber's going in when you look at his numbers, and he's been better, at least in terms of his last couple of starts have been on the better side. He hasn't given up home runs in back-to-back ball games after that tough game there against Cincinnati. 7 strikeouts against Detroit in his last time up. The Rockies are going to need Gomber to go out in that rotation and start things off. This series is going to be won or lost due to the Rockies pitching. The Rockies pitching is going to have the bigger impact in this series than the offense. And I think that's a pretty simple thing to say. I know they're overworked. I know they're turned to a lot, but this is kind of the status of the Rockies right now. So when do either the Rockies as a front office and with their manager make adjustments to not keep having to run the same, core pitchers out, the same rotations, and go to that bullpen more quickly? Or when is the rotation and the pitchers, when are the adjustments going to be made there to help get them the rest they need and get the length in the ball game that they needed to when they go when they have needed them the most this year? It's really unfortunate to see the Rockies bullpen step back, especially when they were at moments in this season one of the best teams in one of the better bullpens in baseball. But plain and simple, with the Rockies' issues at starting pitcher, it all has led to this, and the splits only get bigger when it comes to the road, especially for the Rockies. So it's amazing. It really is amazing to see how close these two teams are in some areas, but then the massive differences between these two pitching staffs and in the extra base hits and the home run categories. It's something that just it highlights really truly the big issues with the Rockies and with this team as constructed. Like if you are sitting there as the Rockies and you're kind of looking at these numbers and comparing, you might feel encouraged. But then you look at the record. Then you look at the fact that the Giants swept you already. Then you look at the overall record that the Giants have had against the Rockies of late, and it's just not working. So I really do think we might see. We should, and that's a good point, Luxace. We should know the Giants, but it simply doesn't seem that way. The preparation, all of it just seems different. I mean, there's just something. It's really weird when the Rockies play the division, when the other teams just have these crazy numbers and appearances and all these same type of things. But when they match up with the Rockies, it's just like they know everything's coming. It's like they know how to handle it. I mean, it doesn't ever feel safe to have a lead against these teams, and it just always feels so draining to have to go to San Francisco or LA. I don't know. There's no real merit or anything behind that, but it just seems like division rivals other than San Diego just have the book on the Rockies, and we're going to see it. We're going to see it in this series. We're going to see the weaknesses of the Rockies fully exploited, and we're going to see like random Giants players are going to come out of nowhere and have big series. It always seems to be the case. It always seems like that is how it happens. I don't know. And again, it's weird. It's a weird conspiratorial type of take, I guess. But anyway, the Tiger, Kevin Greenho here says the Tigers took out the Rocks with their numbers 6, 11, and 12 starting pitchers. 8 of their top 10 starters were out for the Rock series. They have 15 guys that can start in Detroit. Derek Brown says the Rockies have one of the worst pitching staffs in baseball. I think the comparisons between the A's and the Rockies, the A's, I think, are the only team statistically worse than the Rockies in some categories. Certainly in run differential, the only ones are I think that's pretty far off from the A's, but I think the Rockies are worse than the A's in some categories as well. Derek Brown also says, part of me wonders if the Rocks would be better off with a retractable roof. Pitchers don't want to come play for a team where their ERAs are going to get wrecked. Yeah, but you're never going to get a roof. And I mean, it kind of makes sense. Like, roofs make total sense. And it is, it's a something about, you can't block the view. That's like a main thing. They certainly will be address. They will never address weather, but it's kind of funny with sports, right? Like, everywhere should have they were talking about this on the broadcast. Actually, it was interesting that Tampa Bay and Houston, they don't have to deal with the same type of issues when it comes to weather and atmosphere and things like that because of the roofs. And it is really interesting how much those roofs probably play a factor. Like, think about Jacob deGrom, for example, going to Texas. Health aside, you're not playing in New York anymore. You're not dealing with any of that. You're playing in a place that has the roof over your head. How much of a factor does that buy into pitchers? And I think it's going to get more and more as time goes on. Let's talk about this being a get right series and kind of look ahead. The Giants have not, at least according to ESPN, have not announced a pitcher for tonight. So that'll be something interesting there to watch. The Rockies are looking to get their first win of the season against San Francisco. And both these teams have lost 4 out of their last 5 ball games. The Rockies have lost 4 in a row. The Giants just snapped a 4-game losing streak. That is coming up next here on the Locked On Rockies podcast. This is the Locked On Rockies podcast. We're free and streaming on your favorite streaming service, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every single day right here on the Locked On Network. You can also find us on SiriusXM and the SiriusXM app. Just search Locked On Rockies, and you'll find us where you need to go. And you'll also be able to get all your play-by-play action of the Colorado Rockies when you're feeling so inclined. It's been interesting to listen. I think if you listen to the broadcasts of late, you're kind of hearing you're hearing a lot more saltiness, I think, and a lot more frustration than you usually get from the Rockies announcing teams. I think there's just kind of this. I'm just trying to figure out the best way to describe it. It's I don't know. I think ire might be the best way. I mean, there's just some kind of, it feels like they kind of, I don't know. It's a metaphorical eye roll where it's just like the sugar coating. You can't really do any of the sugar coating right now. There's been times in the past, there's been other things. I mean, there's been Rocky seasons in the past that have been bad, and the Rockies have been bad. But this, at this point in like Rockies history, and it's they just, I think all of the culmination of the past few years is really starting to wear on the people following and passionate about this team. I think it's not just the broadcast teams, and you can see it in the people writing and following and covering this team. I mean, the pulse and the lack of energy and the lack of enthusiasm and the lack of just anything. I just like I just don't even think that there is it's so strange to finally hear. I can't remember, maybe people can point this out to me, but I haven't heard very many times where there's just an overall sense of apathy towards the Rockies from all sorts of people here in across the system. And hopefully the Rockies can get back on track here and coming into this series against San Francisco. But again, it's so tough to feel confident going up against division rivals like San Francisco and division rivals like Los Angeles. I mean, it just, especially on the road. I mean, 13-31 away. The Rockies have lost 4 in a row. I mean, if you're going to build some positive momentum going in, this is a series to do it. I mean, you got 3 opportunities. Then you don't see the Giants for until September, which is kind of nice. So go make some noise at Oracle. Austin Gomber on the bump for the Rockies tonight, 6-7, 6.64 ERA with a whip of 1.56. He's been, the strikeout has ticked up a little bit for Austin Gomber. Even in that loss to the Reds, he was able to get 6 strikeouts in that one, got 7 strikeouts against the Tigers. I think that's going to be key for him in this start. I think the best version of Austin Gomber that we can is when he is getting the strikeouts. And if he goes out there and he pitches 7 innings, gives up 2 runs off of 6 hits, I mean, that's and 1 walk. That's a good start, and that should be an opportunity for the Rockies to go out and help this team and help Austin Gomber get a W and help them start this series off the right way. But it's the road Rockies. It's San Francisco. All of the warning signs are on full display here for the Rockies. But we shall see. Like we talked about in segment number 2, how are you going to win this series? It is going to come from starting pitching, especially. If your starters keep you in the game, if your starters are able to go the distance, they are going to be able to make sure that they are in a position to steal some ball games from San Francisco. But on the flip side, this is a San Francisco Giants team that certainly would love another sweep, is certainly capable of sweeping the Rockies. We've seen them do it a few times. We've seen we know how capable they are. And if San Francisco is able to have a winning series here and the Dodgers falter a little bit, it's a San Francisco team that can get themselves right back in the mix for the top of the NL West going into the All-Star break. So San Francisco is looking to come in and handle business against the Rockies. Let's see if Gomber can lead the way. We'll be talking about it here, all the Rockies action right here on the Locked On Rockies podcast. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you for being part of the Locked On Rockies live chat. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. You can find us on your favorite streaming service. You can find us live on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel. You can find us on Sirius XM as well. Thank you so much again to our everydayers out there. And folks, until next time, this is Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Rockies podcast.